And to find out how the coalition will respond, I spoke earlier with the Shadow Treasurer, Ted O'Brien.
Well, there's no doubt that we need to keep this sort of capability in the country. We need these sort of communities and workers supported, Ross. But here's the problem. The government only focuses on the lifeboat. It doesn't focus on that which is forcing these companies to drown. You've got to start looking at the cause of the problem, not the symptoms. And when it comes to these large energy-intensive companies, it's the cost of energy. And that's before you get to issues around industrial relations and taxation. Energy costs are among the highest in the world, and this government is only making it worse. I'd be far more sympathetic to some of its industry policy if it was getting the fundamentals right, and they're the sort of fundamentals, Ross.
OK, so the basics of this are that Australia has got some of the largest coal reserves in the world. It's certainly got amongst some of the largest gas reserves in the world. And we keep on hearing stories about energy prices are going to come down. But it seems as though industry is either needing government support or walking out the door of Australia simply because those energy prices are too high. That's what Mark Vassella from BlueScope was really challenging the government about this week.
And Ross, you've got to ask yourself, so why is the government acting like this? Everybody knows energy prices are only going up. I mean, I cannot find anybody in industry, I cannot find anybody in the energy market who is saying prices will come down. No one other than Chris Bowen and Anthony Albanese. No one truly believes them who's in the industry. So why are they doing it? They claim they're doing it because they're reducing emissions. But here's the thing, emissions aren't even going down in Australia. And once these large manufacturers close their doors, where do those operations pop up? The likes of India and China. In the manufacturing sector, emissions in those economies are 3 to 4 times more than Australia. So this is just a net loss for our country. We have capital going overseas. We have sovereign capability collapsing. We've got jobs lost. We've got regional communities decimated. And the best the government can come out with is to say, but it's all good because we're going to reduce emissions. But they're not even reducing emissions. In fact, when it comes to global emissions, they're pushing them up. And this is why I get so frustrated, because Australia is becoming poorer, weaker, and more dependent on supply chains from overseas. And it is the policies of the Albanese government which is forcing these outcomes.
But you politically recognise the numbers, and the numbers are if 60% of the jobs created over the past 4 years have been related to government enterprise, shall we call it NDIS, childcare, being public servants being expanded, state and federal, those people are beholden to the government for their jobs. So the numbers really say that the Albanese government, Anthony Albanese himself as Prime Minister, is going to be there after the next election and perhaps further on and beyond that.
And we've just got to make sure, Ross, that doesn't happen, candidly, and that's our job in the coalition, and that's what we're united on, is trying to get rid of this bad government. But you're right, it's almost a philosophical approach. So Labor's approach is government knows best. The government should be at the centre of the economy, and therefore, as jobs get created, they have to be jobs which rely on government, on the non-market sector. It just so happens productivity has gone backwards by 5%. So the biggest drop in living standards in the developed world is Australia because of that approach. Our approach as a coalition is the complete opposite. We believe that the Australian people should be at the centre. Enterprise should be at the centre. The private sector should be the ones driving the economy, because it's the private sector which has higher productivity. It's the private sector which invests, takes risks, creates ideas. That's what drives competition. Now, that doesn't mean there's not a role for government. Government's got to get the settings right, which, again, is the likes of energy and taxation, industrial relations, regulation, approvals. That's where the government should be focusing its attention, to basically clear the way, allow the private sector to move forward and grow. Because when that happens, you see capital allocated to Australian business. Instead, we have seen Australia become a capital exporter. You know, there's more capital leaving Australia as opposed to capital coming into Australia, which has traditionally been the case. Now, partly that's due to our super funds. But even our super funds are running out of things to invest in Australia because they're not getting the return. Why? Because the government is putting itself at the centre, and when it comes to the private sector, they're crowding it out and they're putting too many barriers in the way. And I think that's the two big divergent views of how to run the economy between Labor and the coalition, Ross.
OK, so then there's the other aspect, and that is government spending. Government spending is growing faster than the economy is growing. So you cannot do that forever without there being some sort of a crossover point where there is a crisis in the Australian economy. Oddly enough, to get your message through, do you sense that maybe there needs to be a crisis in the economy? You don't want one, but does it need to be that sort of a crisis that makes people realise that they need private enterprise, they need the economy to grow faster?
Oh, Ross, I really hope that isn't what's needed, because you're right, and the numbers do the talking. Growth in government spending is 4 times faster than the growth of the Australian economy. That says it all, right? But we can't afford to wait until there is an enormous crisis for people to realise what's at stake. And that is because if we keep going the way we are, the Australian economy can't handle a crisis. And this is why restraining spending is so important. I mean, if you think of it all the way back to the GFC, right? Australia handled the GFC in large part because the coalition had gotten the economy back in a good state before it hit after the Rudd-Gillard years. So it was thanks to the coalition that we were able to manage that. And then it was likewise when it came to the pandemic. We were able to get the economy in good state. Now, the risk for us is another external shock comes and we're not ready because, in fact, we've been spending too much. Debt is too high. We just don't have the wriggle room. And that's really the big risk, and I hope it doesn't come to that in order for people to realise it. OK, so you get the sense, though, with Anthony Albanese as the Prime Minister and trying to paint himself almost as a Labor legend. He wins the next election. From here today, it's almost 5.5 years before the election after that. In 5.5 years, with a very Labor-minded Prime Minister who was a spending Prime Minister, our economy could be vastly different than what we are in today. Completely different, Ross. And this is why we need to do everything we can to call it out. They need to do 2 things. 1, they need to stop the spending spree, and 2, they need to grow the economic pie. And that's our job as an opposition. That lies with me and my colleagues to call those 2 imperatives out. And Australia can't afford to be waiting 5.5 years because they're locking us into a trajectory, into a way forward. I mean, we were talking about energy before. They are overcapitalising in a system which is too expensive. And once they overcapitalise, they physically build out a new system and they close down another system. Well, they lock Australia in because there's only one system to use. And this is the problem. The longer they have in office, the longer they have to set Australia on a path to become poorer, weaker and more dependent on foreign supply chains.
So then the answer right now, if you did have the power, what would that look like? What's the alternative look like to what's there right now?
To focus on those 2 things. Number 1, you would have to stop the spending spree. Now, that means you'd have to introduce quantifiable fiscal rules. You would have to drive efficiency in government and you would have to be cutting wasteful government programs. And then when it comes to growing the pie, which is the second imperative, you just have to focus on productivity. You have to be getting the government out of the way, stop crowding out the private sector, deal with issues of regulation, deal with issues of energy, deal with issues of taxation, deal with issues of approvals. And so they're the priorities that we would have if we were in government. And Ross, that is why, since we're not in government, we're being very open, saying, Albanese, they're the priorities you should adopt since you're the ones in government.
Tell you what, Shadow Treasurer Ted O'Brien, always good to chat to you. Many thanks for your time on the program today.
Thanks very much, Ross. All the best.